There, it should be started now.
Okay, well, maybe that would make it different.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I'll just have to do some more research this week and
Okay.
try and make it work. So anyway, we get him up front. He just doesn't get you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Nuts.
It's okay.
Alrighty.
And so generally you're connecting, number one, with a nice new edition, and
Yeah.
that's great. I enjoyed this edition as well. Because if you were to go through and pull the larger, guys, I've tried to read it in this text, and it sucks. It really is a hard read in here. So when I pulled it in this edition, it really was a much more accessible edition. So I'm glad you discovered that as well.
Yeah, well, I love the chapter intros as well. And then I really like how the Gita, the translation of the Gita just goes straight through. I've read versions where the author interjects like every verse. And it's so much content.
There's so much extra material.
Yeah. So this has been really great. I already feel like it's really hit spiritually home for me. It's been very inspiring.
Excellent.
I really like it. Want me to pull out some ideas from?
Yeah, if there's one idea
Okay.
that you captured.
I love his definitions of a lot of these words, these Sanskrit words. I think they're very digestible. And it's just a really interesting way of looking at the mind and thoughts and reality and what it is. I'm trying to think of something that is underlined. I really like how he talks about karma and dharma. He really talks about how fundamental those two concepts are in Hindu.
Can you find your definition of karma?
So
What page you're on?
I'm on page 34 looking at the middle paragraph. I annotated karma in the mind. So it says everything we do produces karma in the mind. In fact, it is in the mind rather than the world that karma seeds are planted. And the page before on page 33, the bottom paragraph says, baldly put, the law of karma says that whatever you do will come back to you. It's pretty straightforward, and I feel like up until this point, karma and dharma have been fairly convoluted ideas for me. I haven't fully understood. And I like how he also talks about how karma isn't a punitive action. It's not to punish people. It's just the energy that is circulating and coming back to you. So it's a great way of thinking about it.
Can't wish it on somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
And
We can't understand it.
there's a wonderful sentence on page 34 that this would be the second full paragraph. The purpose of the Gita is to show you how to do what. It's terribly, then now I'm going back to the previous sentence. It is difficult to remove such a tree and terribly difficult to undo the effects of a lifetime of negative thinking, which can extend into many other people's lives. But it can be done. And the purpose of the Gita is to show you how. So there's a purpose statement for the whole Gita that I think is important. And it's to sort of figure out how to deal with karma. Karma is going to be crucial. Our health understanding in Hinduism is going to center on karma. That when people are unhealthy, they connect it with karma. And so their thinking process, so to understand a person who has immersed themselves in Hindu thought, is to do a similar immersion in what karma is, because that's their health perception. So we're going to have to really watch karma and make sure we begin to think of it on how people will construct a health attitude. And so that's important. I'm assuming you didn't have a chance to read anything, Ian?
No, I have not.
Okay, thanks. And
I'm reading along.
Yeah, no, that's good. I went to page 15 because for me, I like these purpose statements in an introduction. It helps me frame my reading so that when I'm reading it, I'm catching not just what's interesting to me, but what's the focus of millennia of readers trying to understand it. I'm in the second full paragraph, and the paragraph that starts, "The thought was thrilling." I'm now in the very, well, maybe I'll read the paragraph. "The thought was thrilling. Oh, I felt the way Schliemann must have when he finally reached that desolate bluff of Western Turkey and knew he was standing on the ringing plains of windy Troy, walking the same ground as Achilles, Odysseus, Hector, and Helen. Yet at the same time, I felt I knew the setting of the Gita much more intimately than if I had ever, that I could ever know this peaceful field. The battlefield is a perfect backdrop, but the Gita's subject is the war within, the struggle for self-mastery that every human being must wage if he or she is to emerge from life victorious." And so we discover that every religion is attempting you to transform. We talked about that last week. The Gita's point is to give you a tool to transform from what to what, from where you are to mastery of this of self-mastery that you have to wage. And so we'll discover in so many of the religious traditions that this goal of transformation, this goal of self-mastery, is a goal that each religion attempts to achieve. And the Gita is a key tool within Hinduism to give you those tools. And so that makes it an important tool. And for many of you, you've heard in Muslim thought, the jihad. And a jihad is often used as the warlike character of the Islamic warrior. Well, that's the lesser jihad. The greater jihad is just what we've read. Mastery of the self within. That's the greater jihad of Islam. And so that term of Islam that we sort of associate with that warlike struggle is used internally within Islam to accomplish the same goals. And so that's the challenge, is how in the world do these religious traditions accomplish that task of bringing you to excellence within their own traditions. And so the Gita is our tool. Thank you. Okay, appreciate that. And in front of you, you've got, and again, Ian, I don't have it online yet, is the Hindu chapter. And for Kate, if you'd grab that green, that's one chapter out of the text that I've been building for my students, okay? And so it's the journey of transformation, and it's the lecture notes. And so I'll stop giving you my slides because I think that's not very good learning. I think it's fine when you're just paying for a lecture and I'm lecturing. I don't want you lost in writing, but as a student, I want you to engage in the material so that you learn it. And so I feel it's a better mechanism to do lecture note outlines so that we're tracking well. And so that's what I'm giving you today, is the lecture note outline for Hinduism. And the full journeys of past transformation are all of the religions that I include in the overall course itself. As you're going through this, you'll see at the bottom, so you have your lecture notes, but you also have interesting points or thoughts that you're thinking about as well. And I encourage you to doodle on it. But what is also important is if you go to page 96 in the transformation, you'll see an entire page that actually has been built by a student. And so students have been adding to the book since the day I produced it. And so this page is Hinduism, a diverse religion. And there's a little comparative, really a nice one-sheet handout of what Hinduism is that this student, and this was Ryan Hodges at the bottom, built for the class in one of its iterations. And so you'll see a very nice one-page handout of Hinduism. And if you dive deeper, you'll see other students' contributions. Some of them did all the contacts in Portland. I think even on the back page, I think I missed a page, it's women in Hinduism. So one of my students did a page on women in Hinduism. That's your project, folks. Okay? That's when we talk about a project for this course, that's what it is a contribution to this that other students can then enjoy in the future. And for this time around, and probably for some time in the future, I'd like for you to deal with some aspect of health, healing, living, or dying. I would love a page on each one of those individual topics that you at the end of in December, when we get there, would present to the class. So that's the project. Whenever you're looking at the syllabus, that's what I'm thinking, is I want a page out of each student. Okay?
So you wanted one page each on health, healing, living?
No, now you pick.
Okay.
Now you
Okay.
dive into
Okay.
health, healing, death, and dying. Find a topic that would make a great page and give us a one-page synopsis of it. Okay? It might be, for example, the death rituals of Hinduism. And there's a reasonable variety. And wouldn't it be interesting to know what they go through in their death rituals as they're building their funeral pyres to be typically set into the Ganges River, if they can get to it, and set alight. Well, what does that mean when they go through all that in their death ritual compared to what we do in our death ritual? So there's nothing dealing with how they perceive health. There's nothing dealing with that. And so it might be a page on karma. There's not a page on karma. It might be, so you get to choose an interesting topic that you'd like to do as a project. And it would be a one-page summary for this particular iteration of Hinduism. Okay, does that sort of make sense, Ian?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Okay, so that's the journeys of transformation. Okay, everybody? And I also asked you to do some homework, becoming aware of any religion around you. Ask someone to tell a story. Start with your family. Listen to others. Become mindful. What happened this week? Did anybody have a chance to work on that? Kate? Sorry, there's only two, so I'll ask everybody almost every question.
Yeah, I'm happy to share.
Sure.
So I talked to my dad a little bit about his experience with religion, and I mean, do you want me to go through this?
Just a quick, what happened?
So his family converted to LDS when he was 6 years old. It was a lot, sounds like, so he ended up leaving home pretty young. I think he was like 16 or 17, and then wasn't LDS after that, and he's just been kind of on his own ever since. He has kind of his own little spirituality, I think, but he hasn't been super in touch with it, so it's been kind of cool, actually. I've been on my own spiritual journey the past couple of years. He's been kind of wanting to know, like, what's going on? Like, what are you doing that's so, like, making you so happy? So being able to share that with him has been really, really cool. And I also asked my roommate, so Colt and I, our roommate Kurt, we just asked him what his experience with religion and spirituality was, and he grew up going to Christian churches. I guess they went to a whole bunch of different ones until they finally found a community church that was good for for what they were needing. And he doesn't actively practice anything right now, but he connects through nature. He loves being outside. He does a lot of biking, hiking. He was a river raft guide this summer, so you name it, he's outside doing it. And that's,
Wonderful.
yeah, it's
Wonderful.
cool to connect with everybody, or people on that level.
You enjoyed it, didn't you?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it's cool how people open up. Like you ask them a genuine question. It's not small talk by any means.
No.
So then you actually get to hear about them and something that's important to them.
Wonderful. Good response. Ian, did you have a chance to do any of this?
Yeah, I have an experience to speak to. So personally, I was baptized when I was 4 years old, maybe, and really never went to church, and it wasn't like prevalent in my family. So I think that was just something that we did like with my grandma and my mom, and yeah. So pretty much I grew up just in a generally spiritual community, and I've reconnected, connected to spirituality through meditation, yoga, and Buddhist practices mostly. And now I'm like, just gaining an appreciation for all religions and how they can be that tool for different people and different cultures. And so a week ago, I officiated a wedding for two really good friends of mine.
Wonderful.
And my friend Nate, his side of the family was very strong Christians. And their dad and their uncle are part of the Calvary Church, I think. And so one evening, as I'm the pastor at this wedding, we spent a few days and evenings together. I was to say grace for dinner the night before the wedding. And I started out by saying, giving thanks to, Father Spirit. And then I said Mother Earth. And I heard about that later. Yeah, my friend Nate's mom was like, my son is getting married under one God only. And that is, that is our Father Spirit. And, and then I was like, this is a great learning opportunity for me. She was, maybe a little upset and, concerned with who was conducting this service. But, I took it as a learning opportunity and, learned about the Holy Trinity and, our Father, God, his Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, the love that flows between them. And, it was just a really big eye opener to, like how that religion really doesn't, in those moments doesn't really seem or feel to accept other belief systems. There's one God, and I can acknowledge that in so many ways, that, all of creation is God, and that, in their eyes, acknowledging Mother Earth is, to acknowledge another God, and that's more than one God, and that's not okay. And so, that was a learning experience.
You had quite a learning experience. Well, thank you. That's very much something that's going to be part of Religions of the Book, is trying to walk you through those perceptions and why Christianity is like it is. And I think it's really important. Mm-hmm. Lynette?
And then, it is that whole, when you're communicating with people, to understand where they're coming from so that you don't step on a landmine. It doesn't mean that your beliefs have to be just the same as theirs, but you just have to pick your, I don't want to say pick your fight, but pick your conversation and have an understanding so that you don't step on a landmine. You know, we do that politically as well in our own family. You know, we might have similar beliefs on a religious level, but we are completely opposite to politically. And so we just know that there are moments that you just step around that landmine, and then there's times when you don't, and you have a good, really serious conversation. But when it comes to, you know, marrying, burying, and baptizing at some point, you know, you have to realize what's important and who is it for. You know, it's not about the person who is offering up the you know, the what do I want to say, the ceremony
Services. Yeah.
It's not about the person offering up the ceremony. It is kind of morphing into and focusing on where the family is and what they need, and just, you know, magnifying that part of what they need. It's hard because, you know, you want to just say everything, but just knowing that is really valuable, really, really valuable.
Excellent learning.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Very
yeah,
nice.
that was good.
Okay. Anybody need a break? Do you need 5 minutes, or can we launch into the lecture?
Oh, 10 o'clock.
How we doing? You okay, Ian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, we're okay. You need a break, that'd be fine. Like to get started.
Mhm.
Oh, this is gonna work for me. Oh, let's get this in the right place. There we go. Okay. Oh, starting in the wrong spot. Sorry about that.
All right.
On the wrong
I am going to go grab something real fast.
Yeah, way to go. Okay, and iLearn worked okay for you? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I'm using it. Okay, I'll just take it.
Yeah, take a break. Okay, it's a good time to do it.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Kate took a break, Ian, so we'll take a second.
Okay. I'll hang out with you for a little bit if you don't mind.
Sounds great. And so tell me, how did you know them in such a capacity that they invited you to officiate their service?
Well, Nate and Sierra, the couple getting married, are really good friends of mine. And yeah, I've known Nate for 5 years and Sierra for 10 at least. And when they told me that they were getting married around that time, I was like, oh, well, if you would like me to officiate your wedding, let me know. And that's how it came about. And then when they asked me to marry them, they're like, so we've decided that we would like you to officiate our wedding. Nate's words were like, you just have to use the word God. I was like, okay. And
That was his only instructions.
Yeah. Wow.
there was obviously a lot more to it than that.
Yeah.
You know, I really enjoyed the tradition of, you know, of saying grace for the family around meals throughout the couple days that we were all together. And, you know, I definitely, I took the time. I mean, I probably spent 15 hours on the ceremony, maybe 20 hours in writing the ceremony, and in the end, you know, but through that one incident and his mom coming to me, and then prior to that, just taking time to talk to his dad, and then talking to both of his parents before the ceremony took place, and having done some research, yeah, I built a very strong ceremony, and you know, and gained a lot of awareness of where they were coming from and what they believed in, and I felt I didn't feel, you know, in the end, I didn't feel attacked or that my beliefs were wrong, and that I was still able to acknowledge their belief system and understand it and coalesce on that level with them.
What a wonderful spiritual moment. So I applaud you for doing that and giving it so much time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
When we initiate the study of a religion, we're going to break the religion into 3 areas. And it's 3 pathways that we'll wander down with each religion that we touch on. First, we're going to deal with the sacred story and the historical context. And so we'll tell a bit of history to get you oriented around it. And then we'll deal with the worlds of meaning. What meaning is significant? And if you came from a Christian context, this would be the theology. But Hinduism doesn't think of it in the way that Christianity does, but it has an amazing array of worlds of meaning. And we'll think about what these words that you were encountering mean, and how they function in the lives of people, whether it's karma or whether it's enlightenment or any of these other words. They have they have an understanding and a context that we want to work on. And the third is the pathways of action. How do they act out their religion? How do they get together? How do they do a funeral service? We've talked about. And so those are all pathways of living out the religion. How do you do a wedding? That's a pathway of religious tradition. And people want it to be most meaningful. And so you work very hard to make it as meaningful as possible, because this is such a moment for them. And so the challenge when we come to Hinduism is it's an imposed title. The name Hinduism was applied by the British during the British colonial time on all the religions of India. They called it Hinduism. And so it's a complex number of beliefs from all across India. And I like to warn my students that what's going to happen is I'm going to say something about Hinduism, and if you have a background in Hinduism, or you visited India and a different part of India, you might go, oh, but I was over in, and they don't believe that. They actually believe the opposite of what you're saying. And I'll nod my head and say that's Hinduism. It isn't as uniform as some of our other classic religions. And if you have a sense of Christianity, using your illustration, Kate, with the LDS community, Christians of an Orthodox variety would dismiss the LDS as not being Christian, and the LDS would vehemently claim to be Christians. That's their whole name, the Church of Jesus Christ. How could we not be Christians? And so you get these inversions and variety within religions that for those of us that aren't a part of it, it's really challenging. We're wanting to get an easy set of beliefs so that we can try and understand it. But the reality of virtually every religion is a diversity that covers the entire gamut of belief. So my sense of Hinduism is that over the millennia, the villages of India created their own understandings, and it's only during the colonial time that they seem to interact and relate those beliefs in a way that was forced on them by the British colonial rule. And so they too have struggles in that way. So we're going to find a lot of diversity over the millions of available belief systems in India. We're going to see dominantly 4 religious communities within India, and so when you're when you're looking at this particular map, you get a sense of those religions. My pointer you can't see, and it's hard for me to get to my pointer on the screen. So I'm just going to try and talk it out to you, Ian. And so the blue primarily is Hinduism. Okay, so it virtually covers 95% of India. You're also going to see some Christianity. You're going and there's just little enclaves of Christianity. There's little enclaves of Jainism. There's about 3 million Jains in India. And Sikhism is right at the top, the brown, and that would be the I think that's the brown in the Kashmir, because this isn't terribly clear on my map. I'm not going to spend time on it. But what's most intriguing is Buddhism. There's just smidges of Buddhism in India. So the home of Buddhism, India, has virtually no Buddhists. There aren't a lot of land mass that's associated with Buddhism. And so that's sort of what's intriguing about the various religions that you find here. And so these religions are the ones we're gonna work hard on. Hinduism, we're gonna work hard on Buddhism, and if we have time, we'll certainly enjoy jumping into Jainism. Okay, as we begin to understand it, we have an amazing ground of religion. When you look at the religions we're going to study, India is a wonderfully fertile ground of religious ideas. And if you look at the very top left-hand side of the map of India, you see the tributaries and the main river of the Indus River. And so all of these tributaries are part of the Indus River itself. And this is where India will catch its name. This is where we will have our conversation on the historical contexts of India. And so this is where the civilization likes to sort of make as its landing spot. The Indus Valley itself has had a rich civilization for thousands of years. The black arrows that you see here are the migratory paths of the Aryans. The Aryans are the people that moved into this area around 1500. We'll talk about them in a little bit, and we'll get into that. Maybe I'll just wait until we get back to this. And so we're going to be wanting to know about these migratory people that are coming from the top left into the Indus Valley. And we'll want to understand what's going to happen, because it's going to be the intersection of those people that were there and these migrants arriving that's going to create Hinduism. It's going to be the seeds of Hinduism. So we'll want to know that. And out of this comes these religions. So it's an intriguing religious area. Comments on that? When we come to our conversation about India, the similarities we're going to have are the natural instinct that Ian had. They're going to call that land Mother India. They're going to use that concept of the Mother Earth and the spiritual Father, that heavenly Father. That's a natural way of talking about the totality of spiritual experience. Your naturalists go there easily. Mother Earth is a natural companion to Father Spirit, to use Ian's language. That is just absolutely natural language. And people have been doing it for millennia, particularly your indigenous religions. And so when you confront people that don't quite want to go there, that's rather dissonant, because they're colliding with an awful lot of ancient assumptions
And classically, those classic assumptions isn't necessarily the earth and the earth as maternal and the heavenly space as paternal. It's often been that the God space, the spiritual space, has a paternal element and a maternal element. And that would be the natural expectation of most ancient people. And you'd say, well, why? Well, because that's what happens on earth. And whatever you see around you is simply a mirrored representation of what is going on in the heavens. And so if you have male and female on earth, then you've got to have male and female in heaven. And so people, the ancients will naturally flow to where Ian flowed. That you should represent the maternal and you should represent the paternal. And we're going to have to figure out why Christianity made the big move away from that, because something happened that disconnected them from that ancient maternal understanding. So you see it here where you have the Mother India, so that the language of Hinduism is picking up on the land as maternal. And that's a natural. Where does the creative process happen? It's happening in the mother, the womb. And so it's a natural representation of what people would understand easiest. So you hear it already. Within this other similarities of all these religions, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, or Jainism, they all recognize the value of India. They have a similar recognition. They have a similar recognition of human existence. Your life is in cycles. We are going to have to figure out how in the world the cyclical ideas have been borne out through the millennium, because that's how the Indian religions have grounded all of their thinking. And so life is cycles. We're going to have to come back to that. We're going to have to work hard on that. We're going to have to try and understand it. We're going to have to watch in all of these religions that where the real is. And that real is unified and it's absolute. And so there's something that we as a person need to connect with so that we understand what that is. And so we'll have to search in all of these religions where the real is. We know where the unreal is, and we know where the changeable is, and that's us. We and our environments are really the unreal. We're only living in a completely changeable environment. And so the search will be for the unified and the absolute. When it comes to the sacred, Hinduism is not going to be looking at either personal or historical. We don't have an individual creator. We don't have a savior. We don't have a Messiah. None of those attributes are a focus in Hindu religions. And so we're going to look for something more than that. And what we're going to be looking for is very impersonal, and it transcends all of history. And so that transcendence is what we've got to do. And so that's where we're going to be looking for the sacred in all these religions. And for when it comes to who human beings are, they're going to dismiss the life in a passing world. There's just going to be a dismissal of that because that's changeable. Everybody's different. There's just that can't be the essence of what we should be searching for. We have to figure out how to connect to the sacred. That's got to be what we're looking for, is that connection point. And we have to discipline ourselves so that we can withdraw from this passing world. If the passing world has only transient value from a spiritual perspective, we've got to figure out a way to disconnect from that. And so we're going to look in all of these religions and on how they do it. And these three religions will use very similar techniques to disconnect from the unreal to find the real. And we'll begin discovering those in important ways. So if I were to say, wow, yoga is important to all three of these religions, why?
Well, it's all about withdrawing attention and awareness of the senses and what's happening
Yeah.
on that physical plane.
If the physical plane is not valuable, you need techniques to withdraw.
Yeah.
Yoga is the crucial tool to withdraw. Ian, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, so that you begin, one of the things you want to begin doing is really diving into the spiritual value of yoga. I think in America, they've done a great job of establishing its physicality, what it does for you as a person, how you're healthier, how you breathe better, how you focus better. That almost is the inversion of what yoga is supposed to accomplish. That's extraordinarily self-centered. That's an extraordinary focus on the unreal.
Yeah.
Yoga should be doing the opposite of that. And so I just want you to begin sensing how American religion will adjust any other religion for its own purposes. And it'll begin making it a business. And in the process of making it a business, it's going to adjust it. And so one of the great challenges we have is to recognize that and decide if you can add something to your own yoga training and your own yoga thinking by recapturing some of the ancient thought as to why yoga is trying to do this, as opposed to what we tend to want to do with an awful lot of yoga in America.
And part of the reason we do that is so that it becomes less of a religion and more of just a regular experience, because it's forbidden for most of us to go into anything outside of our own religion.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely forbidden. And for the longest time, if you said, as a traditional Christian person, I'm taking a yoga class, you would have somebody go, oh dear, and roll their eyes and say, no, you should not be doing that, you know? And there's still places that do that. You would still
So
not
yoga,
want to say that.
in an effort to make it a cross-cultural business,
Right.
is focusing on what most people want to focus on, which is the physicality.
So they just make
Yeah,
it
makes sense.
completely secular. That's the whole
Yeah.
thing. It's not,
Yeah.
not be of any religious consequence at all for.
Ian, jump in.
Yeah, I have a couple things. I was in Salt Lake City or Provo a few years ago and was surprised to see that there was a church offering yoga. And then the other thing I was thinking of was, when you asked me if that made sense earlier, yoga, a practice, a tool, a means of withdrawing the senses and subtracting out the unreal, connecting with the real. Even practicing yoga for so long as I have, and being aware of the 8 limbs of yoga, the first thing that my mind does when I hear the word yoga is I think of the physical poses.
Yeah.
And so then it took me a second. I was like, oh yes, yeah, if you acknowledge the other practices within yoga, like yes, there is this complete and whole practice of withdrawing the senses to be with the real and the absolute. So that was just my
Excellent.
awareness.
Now that we've been using a lot of words tonight, I want you to really sense that there's some really important words you have got to master. And so I've given you a one-sheet summary of all of the Hindu terms. Those are on iLearn. If you lose this piece of paper, you'll see it on iLearn. And so just know that there is an expectation coming at you that you know all these words. You may know many more, but I want you to know these. And I want you to know how I use these terms. And so this becomes important. And this will, a quiz will be available on iLearn on these so that you can practice over and over trying to do it. And it'll definitely, these words will be on the final exam, okay? So just a sense to cue you that these words we're using are important to master, and I'm trying to give you some tools to do it, okay? Differences. there's some geographic distance in all of these multitude of various beliefs. And so India is a large place. And so you've got lots of major cities and villages that created their own belief systems. And that's really going to create the differences that we're talking about. And so that complexity, we're going to impose, like the English have done, the name Hinduism. But I caution you to be careful. The real confusion is going to become when we start studying the gods and goddesses of Hinduism. They're all going to sound the same in their definitions, and they're all going to have different names. And it's really, 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 really confusing. The confusion in Hinduism is the greatest of all religions. It's just hard to figure this religion out. And mainly because we want a simplicity of ideas, and they're going to give us a complexity of ideas. And so one of the ones we're going to fight with is what a Brahmin is. And we're just going to fight the battles of all the different ways that Brahma and Brahman are going to be understood in Hinduism. So just get ready.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Without the English name Hinduism or Hindu, how would they describe themselves?
Good question.
I don't have an answer to it.
That's okay.
I don't have a reference that they created a definitional name, or that anything existed that was that attempt before the British did what they did. I'll try and be sensitive to that in my research and come back to you if I find anything. But my sense is, it was the religious idea that existed in India. If I were to guess, it's going to be a phrase like that. It's just going to be a much more generalized
They
phrase.
may not have gathered any of it together until the British came.
Well, it's very much a part of the way that the Western mind thinks, is to give a definition to something that is similar. It's no different than the genus and the various names we give in biology or in those areas. We that's been part of the educational process of the Western mind, is to create categories and then force students to memorize all these dang categories. And so I would bet they didn't care before then, but it's a great question. I'll sense that. Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have a consistent founder, so if you're looking for that special person, even Krishna in the Gita isn't going to rise to that level. It's just not going to be there. And it's the same with it's not quite as Buddhism is got some a founder, but how would he self-define it? That would be an interesting comment. And there's no agreed fundamental beliefs. We've already talked about that. There's conflicts all over Hinduism, and yet there's freedom there. If you want to go a direction that is you feel is spiritual, you can go there, because there isn't agreed fundamental beliefs, and there's no boundaries. And the key definition to Hinduism is that I've seen over and over again is there's many ways to the top of the mountain. Just get to the top of the mountain. And so an exercise when I've got a lot of people in the room is I'll have people go one specific place, go to the sailboat over here on the side of the room. And so everyone has to stand up and walk to the sailboat. And then we self-analyze that and say, how did you get there? And everybody took a different path to the sailboat to get and touch the sailboat and go back home. It's how Hinduism thinks. As long as you're getting to the sailboat, you can go on any path you want. Just get to the sailboat. And so if you take the word enlightenment and insert it into that sentence, it doesn't matter how you get to enlightenment. Just get to enlightenment, and there's freedom there, and that's very much a part of the Indian thinking. And so they don't understand Christians, and they've long ago banned Christian missionaries from going to India. that was probably in the, wow, 60s that India banned all Christian missionaries. It just wasn't good because they collided right here. And so if a religion says you can only get to the mountaintop my way, and you have an entire culture saying you can get to the mountaintop any way you want, you got to keep those two folks apart. And India kept Christian missionaries out. So the only way the missionaries go in is if they're English teachers or they become teachers, and then they bring Christian ideas into India that way. And so that's the fascinating part of India, is it's the same underlying current that I sense in America now. Hey, whatever way you want to be spiritual, go for it. Okay, that's, I think, a dominating theme in American spirituality now, is freedom of spiritual journeys. Go the way you want. And that's very different in the American context. Okay. Hinduism. Well, a Hindu is a person who's from India. A person from India is a
Persian.
Hindu. They're Hindu. That is very precise. That word is an equation. If you're from India, you're a Hindu. If you're a Hindu, you're from India. Now that isn't terribly as meaningful now, as people have commuted all over the world. But that's really what the essence of Hinduism is, that there is no distinction between the political idea of a person of India and the spiritual idea of a Hindu. That's what it is. So Hinduism is the life of a person in India. And you'll see those definitions over and over again, that they've defined their religion on what people normally do in their lives. And you'll see that merger. And it's so interesting, and that makes Hinduism very natural. But it's very unnatural for us to try and explain it, because it's a political statement as well as a spiritual statement. So when people in America want to figure out Hinduism or practice Hinduism, it becomes very odd, because our physical context doesn't assimilate all the ideas of what it's like to live in India as an Indian person, and therefore what Hinduism is. So whereas Buddhism is easily assimilated by people outside and coming to the idea, Hinduism is very hard. You don't typically find a lot of people that want to study Hinduism because they want to become a Hindu. It's a hard journey, because it doesn't make any sense. It's a natural religious expression of the life of a person who lives in India. And so that's why there's a disconnect, and there's not a lot of folks that want to become Hindus.
So if you lived in India and you became a Christian, are you a Christian Hindu?
No, well, they purposely, as Christians, walk away from their entire physical context, which becomes life-threatening to them.
Sure.
The Hindu nationalists have murdered lots of Christians on this ground, especially. You're not only rejecting the spiritual ideas of Hinduism, but they feel you're rejecting the physical reality of being a person of India.
Of India. Yeah.
And you can't dissect them. And therefore, if you attempt to, then you're no different than a traitor. So let's kill you. And so that's the real challenge of what's it like to not be a Hindu when you live in India. You can do that anywhere else in the world, but it's a real challenge if you try and do it in India.
So in other words, it's not just however you get there. If you decide to pick Christianity, it's kind of like, what was it that?
Well, that becomes, because Christianity forces them to eject that primary premise of there's a multitude of ways to achieve your spiritual enlightenment. And so Christianity, because of that aspect of Christianity, particularly Protestant Christianity, then they reject them for doing that in a life-threatening way. So Hindu means India in Persian. Okay, so that's where Hindu comes from. It just means India in a Persian language. So this is why there's such synergy between the Indian, who's a Hindu, and a Hindu who's an Indian. It actually means exactly the same thing. Okay? So they accept and respect the ancient traditions of India. We're beginning to see, we've actually read from a part of the Vedas tonight, and the Vedas are the holy scriptures that we'll be dropping into. And there's a millennial social class structure with special respect for the Brahmins. And now here, Brahmins means priest. And so our first exposure to the Brahmins comes with this recognition of a class structure that's very, very part of the Indian way of thinking. We're going to come back to that because it's as important to Hinduism as it is to the Indian story itself. Okay. How come when we look at that picture, we know, that's a Hindu? How come we know that?
Color of the skin and
Okay.
the cotton clothing,
Yeah.
walking stick.
Headpiece. Yes. But he looks like Gandhi.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
there's our symbol, is Gandhi.
Gandhi.
And so in the Western context, Gandhi becomes that symbolized person of who an Indian is.
Mhm.
And Gandhi lived like, looked like this, lived like this, had a walking stick. And so for those of you that are familiar with the story of Gandhi, have you seen the movie Gandhi?
I
Okay.
haven't, no.
Okay, it might be an important movie to watch during your time here.
Okay.
Ian, have you watched Gandhi?
I have not, and I may watch it tonight.
There you go.
Yeah.
If you wanted it, it's a wonderful movie. I believe it won the Academy Award for that year. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful movie.
What's his name?
So yeah, that's what this. There's just it's clearly a hot climate, so the clothing is light. Head coverings are important, and so there's an interesting introduction to the Hindu, who is just an Indian person from India. And Christopher Columbus really muddled up our language by calling all of our Native Americans Indians because he thought he was in India. And so he called them Indians. So we've called them Indians for the last 400 years, but they're not Indians. They don't come from the Indus Valley. There are Native Americans that we call Indians. So just know your brain has a whole lot of problems assimilating what a person from India is if we use the term Indian.
It looks really like an Australian Aborigine. I mean, you can see so many things that float, the genetics that just float around, you know?
And they track where the Aborigines came from, and the pathway goes through India.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Wow. That makes sense.
And so that is a genetic journey that you can now track, is how the genes have migrated and where the Aboriginal in Australia came from. And they went right through the bottom of India.
Hmm.
Okay, we've talked about this, but there's no specific founders. There's no emphasis on historical persons. There's no interest in a Krishna life like the historical God, like the historical Christ. Okay, so when we're reading the Gita, it becomes really important to say, well, I'm not reading this because I'm finding a savior, I'm finding a Messiah, I'm finding somebody that's going to be my focal point historically that I'm going to emphasize my life on, like Christians will. I'm reading it for other purposes. I'm reading it to find the real. I'm reading it to make myself a better person. I'm reading it to do an awful lot of other things. But you don't read it to find a historical context to plant your feet. That doesn't make sense within Hinduism. It isn't where the real is. So they don't ask you to go there. So there's lots of great kings. There's lots of heroes. There's lots of gods. They're very important, but they're only important as models of eternal truth. And so one of the things I've enjoyed this season is Lynette wrote a myth. over the last little bit. And Ian, if you could see what Lynette's doing on the camera, she's illustrating her book. And she's sitting here drawing pictures. And I'm not offended, which is good news, because she's going to do it anyway. And so that's what she's doing. Okay? Can you see
Oh my
it?
gosh. Yeah.
This is
Incredible.
The character that I've developed, that's the,
I'm trying to find a place where it isn't.
where it isn't all in the
Yeah.
thing.
Can you see it? There.
Wow. Lynette.
So that's- So she's trying to create a myth that will teach families what the pandemic is and how to protect yourself by wearing a mask. And so she's done a story. I call it in the genre of, where'd my name go? The most popular story about magic in the American context right now is
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling.
Harry Potter.
And
Harry Potter.
what?
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Thank you. So in the genre of Harry Potter, she constructed a myth to begin teaching folks what the pandemic is and what your response should be, which is to wear a mask. And so she's constructing something that is a response to a problem that tries to teach it in ways that are mythic, which means greater than the reality that they're actually functioning in. But it's truth, folks. What she's saying is a truth that you should listen to. And so it's been fun for her to sort of mess with this. Well, the Hindu tradition has known that for a long time, that you get to truth by having characters that do things. And so it really doesn't mean if the character is doing good things or bad things. They're both going to teach you truth. And so you don't look at their goodness or badness, you look at the truth they're trying to portray. So that the real sacred history is the sages hearing and transmitting the Vedas. And the key for Hinduism is that it's an oral and a listened to religion. It is the Om, Om. That's the essence of Hinduism, because it's heard, and it becomes a way of hearing it without the focus on the literature. And I would argue that both Judaism and Christianity and Islam, or all three of those, venerate their Bibles, their sacred texts, in ways that actually disrupt what the original religion was. The original Christian religion were people standing up in the midst of a group and telling the story of Jesus, telling the story of the disciples, telling the story of the healings, telling the story of, there were people standing up and telling them. And it was only a scribe sitting in the corner writing it down that created the text that we now look at. So the far more important part of Christianity is the essence of the story itself, hopefully told orally, because the oral transmission of ideas is so much more profound than sitting there reading the text and thinking that that's going to be the best way to understand the spirituality of this thing. Christianity early on was very much like this. It was listening and hearing. So these events are much, much more than history. It's so much more than history. We'll have to discover that. And so now let's come back to the Indus Valley. So the original Indus Valley were what everybody did who lived in a valley. It's what we do in Valley County. We used to do anyway. And that's farm it. And you farm it in the best way possible. And if you want to understand cyclical living, you talk to a farmer. Because a farmer does the same thing every year for their entire career. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So to understand cyclical living, you have to think like a farmer. What happens if you forget something that went wrong last year?
Do it again.
You do it again. And the same destruction happens the following year. So the key to cyclical living is improvement through repetition. And you improve your life through that repetition. And so you have to think like a farmer, especially when you're in an American context trying to understand these religions. So you can begin to understand, okay, I've got to think like every farmer has lived. And so the basis of Hinduism comes from the farmers of the Indus Valley and their understanding that life is cyclical. And life is, and the only way I'm going to improve my life is if I do exactly the same thing that I know is successful, and when it's unsuccessful, I make modest improvements to my life. And that's how you're a successful farmer, is living exactly the same life year by year of all the successful things that you know work for you. And so that creates the cycle of living. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's why it's so hard for us, because we don't live like that. We're always living to make that, make every day better and every year better, and we live on that constant pathway of improvement. But for the ancients, that just didn't make sense, because for generations they've done the same thing, and they will be for generations doing exactly the same thing, and therefore the most important people in your community are the ones that remember last year, and then 20 years from now, before, and then 50 years before. The ones that remember that are the key people to your community that have that memory of the past. And so we begin with the agriculturalists. Their society peaked in about 2500 BC. And so when I'm dealing with folks that have a modest Christian background, I like to use some of the Christian characters. And in the Christian story, or any of the religions in the book, they all venerate Abraham. Abraham, on our sense of a calendar, was functioning somewhere between 2500 BC to 2000 BC. And I'll be using the more generic designation of before Common Era and Common Era. So I'll be using BCE as before Common Era. Our calendar is built on the birthday of Jesus as a zero sort of year, even if our calendar doesn't have a 0 year. It's one of the flaws of our calendar. We don't have a 0 year. But we do pivot our calendar from before Common Era to Common Era. And that simply replaces the Christian designation of BC, before Christ, and AD, after the death of Christ. And so that was the pivot in our calendar that we eventually eliminated out so that we weren't using a Christian calendar. And so we have to sort of understand that. So Abraham is the father of all three of the religions. And so he is functioning around 2500 BCE. They're at their peak at 2500 BCE, which means their culture probably started 2,000 to 3,000 years before that. And we can certainly see that. And they're peaking out when the religions of the book are just getting going. That's Genesis, folks. That's the first major story in all three of those religions is Abraham. And so those religions are just getting warmed up. This religion, as far as the agriculturalists, were at their peak at this particular point. They already had writing that was in existence, and we saw some of the scripting, the accounting. They had cities with water. They had bathrooms. They had covered sewers. So this was the highlight of this religion when Christianity and Islam and Judaism was just beginning. Their religion, obviously, you're going to reverence water. And this speaks to the underlying current of all religions. If you're a naturalist religion, you venerate what is important to you. And every farmer on the planet knows that they've got to have a water source. And so the religion will naturally venerate what is crucial to their life.
and it will also venerate what is crucial, what could kill them. And so they'll attempt to figure out how to manage the possibilities of death and accelerate and to improve that which gives them life. So they're going to be reverent for water. The fertility of Mother Earth is going to be a natural fertility for them for the same reasons. The male is the one that produces the seed, and this begins to open up. We have to begin to realize how the ancients thought about male and female. The male was a farmer who has seed, who plants it in the ground. And it's utterly crucial for our understanding of genetics to sort of say, whatever we think is happening there, they didn't think. The woman is the ground. That's it. And the male comes in and plants the seed in the ground no differently than you push your finger into the ground with a seed in it and you push it into the ground. That recognition of what the male does and what the woman does is crucial to understand the ancient cultures. And so when a woman was infertile, the ground was not good ground, and you had to change the ground. So if she was infertile, it was no different than a farmer saying, my ground needs fertilizer, my ground needs stuff. The woman had to do that same analysis that a farmer would do to say, why is my ground not producing? I've got the seed in me, why can't I make a baby? And so the logic of fertility is the logic of a farmer for all the way up until the 1950s when we began to understand genetics, that the woman now is a creative partner with the male. They're not just the ground that they have to figure out why it's producing or not producing. And also the power shifts because the male is the seed. And therefore the power of the ancients is the capacity of producing the seed. It wasn't the ground, it was the seed. And there was no contribution to the woman except for good soil. And if the soil wasn't good, go get another woman because you need good soil for your seed. So you have to think like a farmer to understand the fertility issues that are happening around the way they perceive life, and therefore health to this.
I just find it really interesting with King Henry VIII, how he always blamed his wives
Absolutely.
for not being able to bear a son. It's your fault,
That's right.
and really it was his fault.
Most
likely.
Most likely it was his fault. But the woman was always blamed because the ground was not good ground. Okay, so just begin to get a sense of what the fertility issues are and how our life is very different to the ancient way of thinking about fertility. Okay, and to understand how women were treated.
Yeah.
It makes sense in some levels why women would be cast off, because their role was to provide good ground, to provide good soil for the seed. And why power was structured as it's always been, with male dominant in power and a woman subservient. It's just a part of this way of thinking about fertility. Kate?
Yeah, well, and isn't it kind of a thing where, like, I don't know if it's this culture necessarily, but like, the family would pay for their girl to get married off, like or
dowry, yeah.
Yeah, is that making sense? Where like, you know, it's like having a girl is like this burden where you're like, oh, we got to get rid of her, we got to pay someone a cow to take her because we need, you know, we can't keep feeding her and she's just an extra mouth to feed.
Right.
Ship her off.
And you focus on the males.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they have the seed.
Right, and it's like
that's the future, is the seed.
They get the education, they get all the stuff.
Yeah.
And so only when you change the fertility perceptions can you change the value of women in a culture. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's important to really get a sense of that.
Girl out of how many boys, and I'll tell you, that's a valuable thing at this point in our lives. It's so valuable. We've never had a girl, and we've been wanting girls for 40 years, and it's like, wow, finally.
Yeah, Ian, we have a baby granddaughter this past week. Her name is
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so we're excited about having a girl
that is a part of the creative process of our family. We've welcomed the girls that have arrived in their 20s, but we really love them in a different way when they're born into the family like this. And you also begin to get a sense of the sacrificial nature, and a farmer would sacrifice the best of the crop. They bring in the first fruits of a crop, and they would sacrifice that to their deities. And the point is, I give you my best, I give you my best, I give you my best. And the extension of that also is human sacrifice. I give you my children. I give you the best of my family. I give you the best. Please be nice to me next year. You know, make sure that I have a good year next year, because therefore I will give you the first and the best of what I have. And so this is part of the sacrificial system that was a natural part of the agrarian society that we would have experienced in the Indus Valley. Okay, comments?
Just along with that dowry idea, I think about how my younger sister, she's 21, she's getting married mid-October, and it's just interesting how like the bride's family pays for almost the whole wedding, where like the groom's family gets off pretty easy as far as all the financial commitments and planning is concerned, and so that's another parallel.
It truly is. It's truly unfair, and it should change.
Yeah.
It should change.
Our last wedding, we ended up paying for
Yeah.
it. And it didn't go well in the beginning.
No.
But no.
Well, still struggles.
It still struggles even though, but.
So into the Indus Valley comes migrants. And the migrants that came in are called Aryans. And this is the title that the Nazis picked up on as far as the definition of the pure race, was the Aryan race. And their attempts to magnify the Aryan race was a key part of Nazi doctrine in the 40s. The word itself means the noble ones. And these were eastward Indo-European. The migration happened about 1500 BCE. This is the time of Moses and his migration. So Moses, we'll discover with the Hebrew people, is causing his people to leave Egypt, moving out of slavery into a nation of Hebrews. And they're doing it about the same time. So there's a lot of migration, which means there's a lot of upheaval happening on Earth. For whatever reasons, there's a lot of upheaval. It may have been volcanoes, it may have been comets, it may have been floods. You just don't know what's causing all the upheaval, but there's a lot of migratory patterns. And we think that this is a huge group. They're coming out of southern Russia, that the origins, and we're now beginning to document those early cities of where the Aryan people came out of. But what's so amazing about the Aryans is they all didn't come into the Indus Valley. The Aryans themselves split, and some of them migrated westward and some migrated eastward. The ones that migrated westward in 1500 are going to arrive in Greece. And our Greek literature is going to be extraordinarily similar to Hindu thought. If you read Greek philosophy after you've experienced Hindu thought, you're going to go, wow, this is a whole lot like Hinduism. If you've never been exposed to Hinduism, you never make the jump, and you assume that Greek philosophy is the be-all and end-all. As one commentator said, all Western society is a footnote to Plato, the Greek philosopher. Well, that's crazy, because Socrates constantly referred to what we would consider to be Hindu thought. You could see it all the way through his thinking. And so where did it come from? It came from the Aryans going to Greece just as much as the Aryans came into the Indus Valley. So they split, and we can see that. And the tracking of those is in the mythology of the Aryan nation. And I've got a 2-volume set of all of the myths that are older than the Rig Veda. and contribute to the Rig Veda. And that's the mythology of the Aryan nations. And so these folks are writers, myth tellers, storytellers, building up of that particular tradition. And so these folks are pastoralists. They have herds that they naturally move, and they just move to where the best land is. And they have priests to write down the stuff and to carry it around and have it available to them, or to tell it orally. And of necessity, they have to be warriors to protect their people as they're moving. They originally had an oral religion with the Vedas, and Veda just means knowledge. And these are the timeless truths. And the oldest of the Vedas is the Rig Veda, which is a hymnal. The easiest way to transmit knowledge is to sing it. And so this early knowledge was developed as a hymnal, as a singing device. And so people would memorize their religion because they were singing it. They would worship the gods by sacrifice, petition as praise. And human beings were partners with the gods in the creative process. The two would work together, and that partnership is also a part of Hinduism. But here we have what is really rather unique to Hinduism. It was the merger of the pastoralists that came into the land with the agriculturalists that were in the land that created Hinduism. There's a merger here of opposite people. People who are pastoralists have a different way of life than an agriculturalist. And so Hinduism is the merger of those two traditions, which is different than the story of Cain and Abel. The story of Cain and Abel is the same groups of people. Abel being a farmer, Cain being a pastoralist. And you have a collision happening there, and a fight and a murder and a horror story in the beginning of the religions of the book. We have Adam and Eve, and then Cain and Abel. And the Cain and Abel story is a person who is a pastoralist with sheep to offer as a sacrifice, and Abel is one that has grain to sacrifice. And the two of them fight and are perceived as brothers, and this first murder happens in the religions of the book. You get a different perception between these two religious groups on those stories right there. This, they're saying, is a merger of partnership as compared to a fight, and one's going to win and one's better than the other, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the story carries through these people for thousands of years.
The carnivores versus the vegetarians.
Yeah. Have I hit a good time? I've got 3 more slides. Let me see if I can get there. Are we okay till 8:30, everybody?
Yep.
You're okay? Okay. I'm gonna try and get through these 3 slides, and then I have my natural break. So where's this one reality? We're trying to find this one reality. Our yoga is going to be trying to find the one reality. What is it? What does this make up of? And so the search for the one reality is the focus of your religions of India, primarily Hinduism. And so the books are going to be the techniques that we use to get there, just as much as the Gita is going to be one part of one of the books of the overall system, which already Kate has found helpful in discovering herself. That's precisely the point of these texts. The Rig Veda is followed by the Brahmanans. Those are the sacrificial manuals. How do you sacrifice well? You better know how to do it well, and you better use the knowledge history of the ancients so that you can always be improving your sacrifices. And that manual is the Brahmanans. And now all of a sudden you're going, Brahmanan, what else is coming at me? So just there's another one you've got to begin to get a sense of. The Upanishads are new ideas about the sacred reality. So they're going to be searching for the center of it all, the one that's unified. This one is the one life of all the gods, the reality of who encompasses all the world. And when you come to they're saying, well, what is it all? Well, if you were to say, what one thing is the unified real, many will use that word Purusha. Purusha becomes that name of the gigantic person, but really they're trying to say everything in the universe is Purusha, but they personify it as a way, as if it's a god. And so Purusha becomes that gigantic person. And Purusha is the last hymn that is sacrificed for the universe to come into existence. And so Purusha is sung into existence. So once you recognize that Purusha is the wholeness of it all, then you begin to look around your community. And again, Hinduism is real life. And if you look at an average community, you begin to discover that their community is a whole lot like McCall. Our community is broken into groups. And if you were to simply begin to sort of say, what's the natural separation of a community anywhere in the world? Well, it's pretty easy to figure out. You have your mayors and leadership, okay? You've got those that are defending the community. We call them police or soldiers. Plus, we've got our merchants that build our business base. Plus, we've got our workers. Does that sound normal? Natural? Every community in the world has exactly the same structure? Yeah. So you write it down. And the reality of what we call the caste system is built on the naturalness of human life. We naturally break into these groups. And so the hymn includes the social order. And part of the universe was created in this primordial sacrifice. And the mouth of Purusha are the leaders, Brahmins, in this case, priests. So there's your leadership of your communities. Your arms are like your body. So your head is the leadership. That's what a head is. That's just completely natural. That's where it all goes. All your soldiers use arms to accomplish their tasks. So the natural metaphor of this are the arms, and that's your warriors. That's your police. They're the ones that defend all this. Your thighs, your midsection, your tummy, your belly. That's your merchants. That's your merchant class. Every community's like that. And your legs and feet, that's who gets the work done. That's the working community. That's the servants. Do you understand now why it's really difficult to eject the caste system? They've been trying since the 50s to outlaw the caste system. Everybody has a caste system. We all live exactly the same way. You can't build a community without these four parts. Now, you might decide it's 5, 10, 20, but in reality, it's four distinct parts that create every society. And so Hinduism is just a reflection of the reality of every community. And so for us to say we're going to outlaw the caste system is like outlawing your body. Your body has arms, it has a midsection, it has feet, it has a head. How do you outlaw your body? And so to understand Hinduism is to understand it as a natural expression of what seems to be life as it is. And so that's it. But the key to Hinduism isn't the body, it's what's within the body. And so the importance of knowledge of the inner reality is going to be where they're going to want to discover. And so our last slide tonight. So if you take the knowledge and the speculation that we put together, and you take your Upanishads and your Brahmanans and your Vedic hymns, those are the Vedas. And Vedas means what I've heard. It's not what I've read, it's what I've heard. And these are searching and probing the inner truths. And one of the key things of Hinduism is sound while saying is more important than the words that are said. Om. 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 And if enlightenment is in the silence, all the knowledge does, Om, is focus you on where enlightenment must be, the silence. And so all this knowledge that you're working on, it's only a guiding pointer to get to the silence that helps you create your enlightenment. And so the sound is so important. The word O-M is not important at all. It's Om. That's what's important. It's the sound of what I'm saying, because that forces you to drive you within. So the early concern of the Hindus was the cycle of death. You've all had animals. You get an animal that lives for a while, it dies. You get another animal that lives for a while and dies. You get another animal that lives for a while and it dies. The cycle of death sucks. And so this cyclical view means you're being born in this world as a result of dying in another. And this is the wheel of existence, and it's called samsara. And you're a part of that wheel, just like your animals have been a part of that wheel in your life. You've lived and you've died, and you've lived and you've died, and you've lived and you've died, and the reason that that's important is that what's inside of you is the essence of what you are, and that essence, which we would use the word soul. The Hindu would say that soul has been in existence forever. It has been migrating forever, so that you live with the soul, and you die. The body disappears, and it goes into a new body, and it lives, and it dies, and then migrates to a new body, and it lives, and it dies, and migrates to a new body. But why? Because that energy, that spirit, that knowledge that makes the person a real person is what is being transmitted, not the body. The body's not important. It's that essence that is being transmitted from person to person, from entity to entity. But the dilemma was karma. We're losing it. Yeah, yeah, it's got.
I'm still here.
Karma, if you can see the illustration, we love this. Illustration is the domino effect of doing something today. Most people do bad things. It's just a reality. People do stupid things, bad things, evil things, awful things. They cause it, and it ripples out from their life, and they have to know it has to circle back and beat them on the head. But as they live with their ensoulment, their body causes them to do stupid things their whole life. And so at the end of the life, they not only have their soul, they have a layer of the previous life that's now encircled the soul. And the next life is going to give them another layer. And so Socrates talked about the onion effect, about how the life is an onion. And the key is all of the lives that we've lived, that this soul has lived, has accumulated. And most lives are hard and terrible, and you die a crappy death. So, and so if you've had a terrible life, you better know life next time around is going to get worse, because you've lived a bad life with whatever you were given. And that badness now turns into worseness, which now turns into horribleness, which now turns into, oh my goodness, I shouldn't even exist, because it's so awful. And that's most people's lives. Yeah, you want to get off of that gerbil wheel. That sounds horrible. Life is horrible, short, and terrible for most people in the world today. It's just terrible. And so get me out of this. I don't want to be living this cycle forever. The goal of Hinduism is to break that cycle. That's the goal. Get me off the gerbil wheel of existence, because all it means is I'm going to come into a next creature, and it's going to be worse. And if you were to think of it in the terms of being reborn, I'm a human this time. I'm a cow next time. I'm a dog next time. Have a terrible life. I'm a rat next time. I'm a mosquito next time. Do you sense that this negative, that there's these layers of negativity because of karma are going to create worse and worse and worse and worse existence? Reincarnation is not a good thing in the Hindu mind. It's not good because it only means you're reincarnating into a crappier existence. You're probably going to get something crappy. So that's the better way. The whole purpose of Hinduism is to break that mindset that I'm in a crappy existence. It's going to be a crappier existence next time, and I got to get off this gerbil wheel. You've got to understand that for Hinduism. Okay. Okay. Is that strange or what?
It's kind of sad.
Makes sense.
Okay. You understand now why karma probably introduces health. I gotta let you go. Okay.
So it becomes pitch black.
It becomes bad to worse to awful. My health is bad because my environment's terrible. The next life, it becomes worse and my health is worse. It becomes horrible and my health is horrible. These are all connected. So to understand Hinduism, we have to understand karma. To understand karma, we understand health. And those are all connected. Okay? This week, seek to understand Hinduism around you. I'm going to send you on what could be a really dangerous journey. I'd love for you to try and connect to a Hindu somewhere. We have the whole world at our disposal. I'd like for you to try and find a person from India who lives in the Pacific Northwest or somewhere around here. They don't live in Nepal. If possible, seek out a health-conscious person, which most people are. I would also strongly recommend you find the same gender. It's just a person to bounce these ideas off of and to begin to understand. Normally, so I've never done this assignment before. It sounds terribly dangerous, but I'm still going to try and see if this is possible. Can we develop a conversation? Because I can't, normally I like to bring in folks into a classroom setting in a Portland or a Los Angeles, because there's people all around. I could find a dozen Hindus in a heartbeat and bring them into the classroom and we could talk with them. I don't have that right now. I just don't have that in a little town called McCall. So I'm trying to sort of create a bridge here, if I could, to see if it's doable. So would you sort of poke around that, go as far as you feel safe, and stop when you feel unsafe? Okay, just to see if there's a way to connect with someone in the world that you can throw ideas at. It'd be wonderful to talk about the Gita to someone that's been reading it their whole life. Wouldn't that be an interesting conversation? Can we find those people and still be safe at the end of the day? I don't know, but I'd like to sort of put it out there as a test. I'd like you to watch that movie. So if it's if you want to watch Gandhi, that'd be a great one to sort of understand the political reality of the British Empire and
Is
how.
Life of Pi another one? Life of Pi. Remember that one?
Yeah, that the Life of Pi has an Indian sense to it.
Yeah. The kid
So
in
if someone
India.
were to watch it, that might be
I'm gonna watch that.
certainly Disney has picked up on Hinduism. Okay. And so the circle of life is
Yeah.
the movie
What is that one?
Lion King.
Oh, Lion King.
Okay. Lion King picked up on this idea of the cycle of life because it's a natural way of looking at life. So you might want to watch the Lion King. I don't know. But become more mindful of Hinduism, either by finding a person that you can talk to that has Hinduism in their core, by watching movies that'll do it. But just I want you to do it. What I also want you to do this week is I want you to start writing. I want a 1 or 2 page response to your reading. You have a reading to do this week, which is the textbook, okay? The textbook, and Ian, the textbook is World Religions. It's an Intro to World Religions textbook. I really don't care how you get I prefer a physical book. I just feel, you can do it. But if you don't have a physical book, and Ian, did you find a physical book?
I ordered one. It'll be in the mail
Okay,
soon.
good. So when it comes, read Hinduism. And then in 2 paragraphs, I simply want you to write about something that strikes you, that's of value to you. And so that's what I want you to write about is I don't want a summary of what you're going to read. I don't care about the summary. I know what it's saying. You know what it's saying. You're reading what it's saying. I want you to find an idea that's meaningful to you in your reading that we might miss if you don't talk about it. And I want you to write about it over the course of 2 full paragraphs. Okay? So I would think by the end of the assignment, you've written at least a half a page, if not 2/3 of a page. And I'd like for you to prepare it for next week. Okay? That's just the analysis that I'd like for you to do. If you want a longer description, it's in your syllabus. Okay? And I want you to read Bhagavad Gita, chapters 1 through 5. Kate's already done, but she probably wants to read it again. Okay?
I'll probably read it.
That's your assignment. Oh, I'm in 5 minutes overtime. Sorry about that, everybody.
That's
But
okay.
That's what I crushed into today. Questions,
Thank you.
comments, ideas, ways to make it easier on you this week?
Come home.
Ian, come home fast.
Yeah, come home.
Yeah, it'll be a few weeks, but I'll be there.
Yeah, keep at it. This works. I'll just try and work the classroom camera so it works for next week.
We'll work on that. Are you in California, Ian?
I am, yeah.
How's the smoke down there?
It actually got a little bit clearer today.
Oh, good, good.
And temperature is supposed to drop 10 degrees from today to tomorrow.
Yay, down to 90.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm in the foothills, so it was like 84 today, and it's supposed to go down to 70s tomorrow.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. We're done.
Yeah. Good night, Lynette. Good night,
Good
Katie.
all.
Good night, Ian.
Appreciate you
Be
having
safe.
you. Appreciate where we're going. Just
Yeah.
a quick word. I spoke to the fire chief this week, and he said, I really need what you guys are working on. He said, the amount of trauma we had to deal with this summer, he said, I could have used well-trained people numerous times. You can imagine what the EMTs are going through. And they don't have what we have in the big cities, and that's the trauma intervention people that are trained. And so, folks, we're really on an amazing journey of trying to be helpful to those folks who are at their lowest. And yesterday, I had an absolutely trauma-filled day because people that were coming around me, their lives were in trauma. I'm in this euphoria of having a new granddaughter. They are living horrible, crappy lives. And boy, did we hit it yesterday.
We did.
I had about 3 people that all of a sudden I dropped into their trauma. And it was a really tough, it was really a difficult time. And we all know it's happening a lot, and it's very much under the surface in a lot of people's lives in the pandemic. So the fire chief just thanked me for getting this started, what it means, what it will mean in the long term. We're on a good path, folks. And I think if you have this kind of background, you are going to be well prepared to be of help to yourself, your family, and to your community by being a person that will be a warrior into trauma as opposed to an observer. Let's go after this. Let's help people in the best way we can. So thank you for giving me the encouragement to build this. Because of you guys, I'm going full blast at this, and I'm thrilled to do it. So, but I'm so thankful that you guys have responded. So thank you.
Well, thanks
Now
for
I'm
saving
10
me,
minutes
Brian.
late. Okay, everybody, go home. Thanks, Ian.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye now.
Yeah, yesterday morning we were just gonna get a little propane stove fixed in our bedroom, and it had been broken for a year. And this guy comes in and he's working, and he's as sweet as he could be.